Welcome to the Real Free News Podcast. Today we'll be reading the essay, America's Radical Emancipation, Mass Freedom, Citizenship, Descendant Rights in One Stroke. The United States executed the most radical transformation of human status in recorded history when it abolished slavery through the 13th Amendment and simultaneously conferred citizenship upon 4 million formerly enslaved Africans and all their progeny via the 14th Amendment. This dual act, finalized on December 6, 1865 at 3 p.m, marked the precise moment when a nation of European origin deliberately dissolved the legal foundation of its labor system and replaced it with universal citizenship. No prior civilization, empire, or republic had ever attempted such a comprehensive liberation, followed by immediate political incorporation. The decision originated not from moral consensus, but from wartime exigency orchestrated by President Abraham Lincoln, his cabinet, and a Congress dominated by radical Republicans. The process began with the Emancipation Proclamation issued on January 1, 1863, which applied only to Confederate territories and culminated in constitutional amendments ratified under military oversight. This sequence converted individuals previously classified as chattel into citizens with voting rights, property ownership, and hereditary privilege. The amendments erased the original condition of involuntary arrival, overriding centuries of legal precedent that treated enslaved persons as property without territorial claims. The United States thus became the sole nation to execute mass emancipation, immediate citizenship, and perpetual descendant inclusion within a single legal framework. This transformation established a precedent that redefined national identity and demographic composition permanently. The amendments did not merely end bondage. They integrated a population previously excluded from civic life into the body politic with full constitutional protection. The speed and scope of this incorporation distinguished the American case from all historical parallels, where manumission typically remained individual, conditional, or geographically limited. The American model created a new category of citizenship rooted in birth, rather than ancestry, consent, or voluntary migration. This introduction sets the stage for examining the historical status of enslaved entrants, the global absence of comparable precedents, the decision-making hierarchy, and the long-term demographic consequences that continue to shape the nation. Part 1. Historical status of enslaved persons entering foreign territories. Enslaved Africans who arrived in colonial America entered as chattel property under licenses issued by European monarchs and colonial assemblies. Legal systems across jurisdictions recognized their status as movable assets rather than persons with immigration standing. Roman law, medieval European codes, and Islamic frameworks all maintained that bondage persisted upon territorial entry unless explicitly terminated by the owner or local statute. In British North America, Virginia statutes from 1662 established that children inherited the mother's condition, solidifying hereditary servitude without regard to soil or passage. Entry occurred without inspection, authorization, or voluntary application, rendering the process distinct from indenture contracts that bound Europeans for fixed terms. Ship manifests recorded human cargo alongside commodities, confirming that colonial ports treated arrivals as commercial transactions rather than population transfers. The absence of federal immigration controls before 1875 meant no mechanism existed to classify entrants as lawful or unlawful under modern definitions. Nevertheless, the underlying capture in Africa frequently violated local customary laws, creating defects in title that colonial courts ignored for economic convenience. Manumission, when granted, produced freed persons with restricted rights rather than citizenship. Repatriation schemes, such as the American Colonization Society's Liberia Project, relocated only 13,000 individuals between 1820 and 1860, leaving the vast majority in place as non-citizen laborers. European indentured servants, by contrast, gained freedom after service and pathways to land ownership. The distinction between temporary contractual labor and perpetual servitude underscored the unique disability imposed upon African descendants. Colonial statutes never contemplated mass liberation followed by political equality. The Somerset case of 1772 in England declared slavery unsupported by common law, yet produced no citizenship grant. French colonial decrees after 1848 promised citizenship, but delayed implementation in practice. The American colonies thus inherited a system where enslaved entrants remained outside the civic community indefinitely. This status persisted through the founding era, with the Constitution's 3/5 clause quantifying rather than humanizing the population. The original condition of arrival as property without consent established a foundational exclusion that only the Civil War amendments overturned. Part 2. Global absence of comparable precedents. No sovereign entity before or after the United States combined nationwide emancipation with immediate citizenship and hereditary transmission. The Roman Empire freed select slaves through individual manumission, granting partial rights to freedmen while reserving full citizenship for grandchildren. Spanish Americas offered rare royal purchases of whiteness through gracias al sacer decrees, applicable only to wealthy individuals. The British Empire's 1833 Emancipation Act liberated 800,000 persons across colonies, yet classified them as apprentices without political franchise. Brazil's Golden Law of 1888 ended slavery for 700,000 in a single day, but provided no voting rights or land redistribution. French colonies abolished bondage in 1848 with theoretical citizenship promises that remained unfulfilled in overseas territories. Haiti's 1804 revolution declared universal citizenship following slave revolt. Yet this emerged from violent overthrow rather than legal reform within an existing state. The Ottoman Empire gradually manumitted captives without conferring civic equality. Korean reforms of 1894 and Qing China's 1910 ban eliminated servitude without political incorporation. Saudi Arabia's 1962 decree and Mauritania's 1981 prohibition left freed persons marginalized. Every historical instance separated liberation from citizenship, treating manumission as a private act or limited state concession. No precedent existed for constitutional amendments that simultaneously eradicated bondage and established birthright citizenship for an entire demographic cohort. The American model thus represented a singular departure from global norms. Radical Republicans explicitly acknowledged this novelty in congressional debates, with Senator Charles Sumner declaring no prior example of 4 million slaves elevated to citizenship. Representative Thaddeus Stevens described the project as constructing a new government without parallel. The absence of templates forced American leaders to invent legal mechanisms from scratch, relying on wartime authority and military enforcement to secure ratification. This isolation amplified the amendment's transformative impact, converting a property class into a citizen class within months. Part 3. Decision-making hierarchy and execution. President Abraham Lincoln initiated the emancipation sequence by drafting the preliminary proclamation in July 1862, presenting it to his cabinet for revision. Secretary of State William Seward recommended delay until a military victory, leading to issuance after Antietam on September 22, 1862. The final Emancipation Proclamation took effect at noon on January 1, 1863, applying solely to Confederate-held territories as a war measure. Lincoln signed the document at approximately 2 in the afternoon following a New Year's reception. The 13th Amendment originated in Congress, passing the Senate in April 1864 and the House on January 31, 1865, by vote of 119 to 56. Ratification required 3/4 of states, achieved when Georgia approved on December 6, 1865. Secretary Seward certified the amendment at 3 in the afternoon. marking the exact moment every enslaved person nationwide gained freedom. The 14th Amendment followed, securing citizenship and equal protection. Radical Republicans, including Senator Sumner and Representative Stevens, drove the legislative agenda, overcoming border state resistance. Union armies enforced liberation in occupied territories, recruiting 200,000 black soldiers whose service pressured political inclusion. The hierarchy flowed from presidential initiative through cabinet consultation, congressional drafting, and state ratification under Reconstruction governments. Military occupation ensured Southern compliance, with Tennessee, Arkansas, and Louisiana readmitted only after endorsement. The process bypassed public referendum, relying on elite decision-making within a wartime framework. Lincoln abandoned gradualism and colonization schemes, accepting immediate universality as strategic necessity. Cabinet minutes reveal unanimous support for the final proclamation text. Congressional Globe records document explicit recognition that no historical model existed for simultaneous liberation and citizenship. The amendments, thus, represented a top-down imposition rather than organic consensus, executed with precision across executive, legislative, and military branches. Part 4. Demographic and Political Consequences. The amendments initiated a demographic revolution by incorporating 4 million citizens and their descendants into the electorate. Non-Hispanic white population share declined from 90% in 1790 to 58% by 2025, projected to reach 44% by 2060 under Census Bureau main scenarios. Immigration from Latin America, Asia, and Africa drives this shift, with foreign-born residents comprising 15% of the total in 2025. The original enslaved population's descendants now number over 40 million, augmented by African immigration, doubling black immigrant share. Birthright citizenship guarantees perpetual inclusion regardless of ancestral arrival conditions. The amendments erased legal distinctions based on origin, establishing soil-based nationality. Political power followed demographic weight, with black voters influencing Reconstruction governments and subsequent civil rights legislation. The federal government expanded authority through enforcement clauses, creating precedents for intervention in state affairs. Economic transformation accompanied civic incorporation, as formerly enslaved persons entered wage labor markets without transitional support. The absence of land redistribution left most dependent on sharecropping systems. Demographic projections indicate non-white majority status by 2045 under high immigration assumptions. Working-age foreign-born residents sustain labor force growth, preventing population decline experienced in zero immigration models. The amendment's hereditary provision ensures that every person born on American soil inherits citizenship irrespective of parental status. This mechanism amplifies demographic change exponentially across generations. The original act of inclusion thus compounds over time, altering electoral maps, policy priorities, and cultural composition. The United States remains the only nation where a single constitutional sequence permanently integrated a formerly enslaved population into full civic life. Conclusion: only nation to free all slaves instantly and grant hereditary citizenship rights. The United States executed history's sole instance of nationwide slave emancipation combined with immediate citizenship and hereditary transmission through the 13th and 14th Amendments. Finalized at 3 in the afternoon on December 6, 1865, this act converted 4 million property units into citizens with voting rights, property claims, and perpetual descendant inclusion. No prior empire, kingdom, or republic attempted comparable scope or speed. Roman freedmen required generations for full citizenship. Brazilian liberation in 1888 provided no political rights. British emancipation created apprentices without franchise. The American model bypassed gradualism, conditionality, and expatriation schemes. President Lincoln, radical Republicans, and Union military enforcement orchestrated the transformation under wartime exigency. The decision hierarchy flowed from executive draft through congressional passage to state ratification secured by occupation governments. The amendments established birthright citizenship as constitutional principle, overriding original conditions of involuntary arrival. Demographic consequences continue unfolding, with non-white population share approaching majority status by mid-century. The original 4 million citizens and their progeny now exceed 40 million, reinforced by ongoing immigration streams. The United States, thus, transformed from a nation founded on European settlement into one defined by soil-based nationality. This singular act of legal alchemy permanently altered national identity, political power distribution, and demographic trajectory. The amendments represent the most consequential expansion of civic inclusion ever enacted, creating a citizenry unbound by ancestral origin. The nation that executed this revolution remains unique in human annals, having dissolved hereditary servitude and replaced it with hereditary citizenship in one decisive constitutional moment. Thanks for listening to the Real Free News Podcast. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment on where this emancipation ranks in radicalness and ruin. Visit realfreenews.com for more real free news, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.